The U.S.-Russian-Israel deal for South Syria, which was approved at the Trump-Putin summit in Helsinki on July 16th, is not working because Russia went back on its promises. This was confirmed in a phone call between Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Vladimir Putin on July 20th. They discovered that Russian guarantees for the non-presence of Iranian militias and Hezbollah near Israel's Golan border were not being followed. The militias were already several kilometers from Israel's Golan border. Netanyahu replied that Israel would therefore be free to wipe out any positions or bases that the pro-Iranian and Hezbollah forces set up in Dara and Quneitra. The following day, Ambassador to Baghdad, Maxim Maximov, stated that Iranian forces would not leave Syria because they were there by invitation from the Syrian government. Meanwhile, Syrian forces advancing in Quneitra were made up of Hezbollah and Shiite militias under Iranian command. Last Thursday night, the rebels surrendered the town of Quneitra to the Syrian army. They broke down when Israel stopped fighting on their behalf, which had been based on the strength of the Trump-Putin-Netanyahu agreement. Trump and Netanyahu hope that Putin will stay with the Helsinki deal as it awarded Russia a stake in a major portion of southern Syria and would strengthen its military dominance in the region. Debka intelligence sources reveal that in the accord, Trump agreed to give over the Russians' southern and southwestern Syria, including key surveillance elevations to view Syria, Iraq, Jordan, Israel, Lebanon, and the eastern Mediterranean. Israel will call off its military campaign against Iranian, Hezbollah, and Shiite militias from Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan troops. Israel would strike any Iranian deliveries of weapons to Syria. Israel would not attack the Syrian government forces moving in on Daraa and Quneitra on the Jordanian and Israeli borders. Netanyahu and Assad would uphold the 1975 Separation of Forces Agreement, which allows for a buffer zone on the Syrian side of the Golan border. Russian military forces would head the Syrian government forces that are pushing into Dara and Quneitra. After these cities are captured, Russian officers would prevent Iranian militias from moving into the border regions to attack Israel. Russian forces would remain in some areas of southwestern Syria to prevent a Syrian army massacre of the local population. The Russian army would continue to rule Dara with local militias funded by Saudi Arabia and the UAE. Trump promised Netanyahu that Israel would be compensated if they refrained from attacking Iranian and Hezbollah forces in Syria by recognizing the Golan as part of Israel. After the summit, Russia sent a Syrian refugee proposal to the U.S. Defense Ministry official Mikhail Mizintsev had this to say at a news briefing on Syria.
Возвращение беженцев и внутренне перемещенных лиц к местам проживания и временного размещения становится первоочередной задачей на пути налаживания мирной жизни и скорейшего восстановления страны в целом. Активному продвижению в этом направлении способствуют договоренности, достигнутые президентами Российской Федерации и Соединенных Штатов Америки в ходе встречи в Хельсинки. Американской стороне нами уже направлены конкретные предложения для организации работы по возвращению беженцев к местам постоянного проживания. Пакет предложений предусматривает разработку совместного плана по возвращению беженцев к местам доконфликтного проживания, первоочередное возвращение сирийских граждан из Ливана и Иордании, создание на базе Оманского мониторингового центра совместной российско-американско-иорданской группы, а также формирование аналогичной группы на территории Ливана.
With us to discuss these topics is Major General Uzi Dayan, former head of the IDF Central Command, IDF Deputy Chief of Staff, and National Security Advisor to former Prime Ministers Barak and Sharon. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
So were the code red alerts this morning across the Galilee connected with the takeover of Quneitra by the Syrian army and Hezbollah over the past 48 hours?
Well, in our region, everything is connected. There is never a dull moment in the northern arena, and actually never a dull moment in the southern arena. I think that what happens today, it's a sign that the Syrian army of Bashar Assad is about to take over, to regain control on the Syrian part of the Golan Heights. And on the other hand, it's a very good sign that Israel can intercept almost everything. And we built a very sophisticated system with at least 3 layers that can intercept everything that can come from Syria and might land in Israel. I think that now it's over, and we are back to, back to normal, which is never normal in our region.
Now that rebel resistance to Assad is crumbling, do you think Israel can expect the northern border to become as active as Gaza?
Look, personally, let's start with some introduction to Syria. There is not good guys and bad guys in Syria. There are bad guys, very bad guys, especially bad guys, etc. We have only enemies there, or almost everybody there. It's an enemy of Israel and the West. So we have to choose who will be along the Israeli-Syrian border. And we have to choose between different parties, different enemies. And personally, I think that the more our enemy is rational, is better, because we are stronger, and we need a rational, kind of rational enemy. And the Syrian army is better than all the other parties. Now, they are not our friends, but for many years, I recommended every Israeli prime minister not to get rid or to expect the fall of Bashar Assad. And not everybody thought this way, but I think that among all the enemies there, we prefer the rational one, and this is Bashar Assad and the Syrian army. We are not going to help them on everything, but it's better to have them on the deployed on the other side of the border.
Is there any sign of an IDF operation against the presence of pro-Iranian forces close to the Golan border disguised as Syrian troops?
I don't believe you really asked such a direct question. We don't just launch operations in Syria unless it's needed, and if it's needed, we usually don't declare or take responsibility on it. In the last day, there was something different, and this was the humanitarian task with the white helmets, but usually we don't take responsibility, and if there is a large-scale operation, we will know about it. Right now, what we do is talking with the Russians, with the Americans, indirectly, of course, with other parties, and we defend or protect the Israeli interests. And the Israeli interests in Syria are pretty simple. I say don't attack, don't launch terror attack through the Israeli-Syrian border, and don't let Hezbollah to have strategic weapon like, I don't know, shore-to-sea missiles, etc. We're protecting our people. We don't interfere in what's going on in Syria because, as I said, we don't have friends there. Nobody is a good guy there, and we don't have such an influence. We are very strong when it comes to protect our people. As you can see in the last months, we're pretty remarkable or very significant player in this region.
Will the presence of the United Nations Disengagement Observer Force halt their attacks?
Well, the presence of UN forces, look, UN forces don't fight terrorism. But if we want to return to the 74 agreements or arrangement, we need them. I think it's positive. It's positive because they will be sitting in some posts that if they don't want to be there, the Syrians will be there. And what we need there, it's observers that will do monitoring and see that Syria don't let, the Syrian army don't let terror groups like the Hezbollah to be deployed along our border. If the Hezbollah or Iranian forces will be near our border, this is a sure recipe to troubles.
Was the last IDF air operation over Gaza effective in getting Hamas to stop its attacks? And do you think the flammable bombs and kites will continue?
I understand that we jump now to the southern arena. So first of all, there is a connection between the two arenas. There is no local events in the Middle East anymore. In our region, every local event can become a regional one, and especially there is a kind of a silent alliance between the Islamic Brotherhood in Gaza and the Islamic Brotherhood in Syria, and especially the Hezbollah, who support very much the Hamas. Now, in Gaza, there is, if we try to simplify something which is pretty complicated, the only way to deter terror organization like the Hamas is to threat his own existence. If he has a territory like the Hamas in Gaza, if we push him out of the territory, this is a threat on his existence. Another threat on his existence is to actually terminate, kill all his leadership. Now, doing that, this is a war, a small war maybe, but or big operation. But from the Israeli public, for the Israeli public opinion, this is a war, and Israel will never go to such a war, a big operation, big-scale operation, if all his people are not convinced that there is no other way. We are a very democratic and lawful country, and the Israeli leadership, I'm talking about politicians and at the same time about the army, the generals. They want to go to a full-scale operation if there is if the Israeli public is not convinced that we use that every day. This is our last choice, and this is what has to be done. And the situation in Gaza is such that we didn't arrive to this stage.
How far do you think Israel should go towards neutralizing the Hamas armed wing and its leaders?
Oh, we can go all the way. There are two approaches to it. One approach is they are our enemy, and every time that they threat our population, our people, we have to go against them and attack and you know, make them pay a price. And if the price is pretty high, they will think it over. The problem is that if they don't think that they are, their existence is threatened, they will continue. It might take 1 or 2 or 3 months, and then there is another round. This is what happened today. Now, Israel is strong enough. This is not a threat on the existence of the Israeli people. But if they will continue that way, finally the Israelis, as I said, will arrive to a conclusion that the Hamas is not a part of the solution. The Hamas is the problem. And once that will be the situation, Israel can actually destroy most of Gaza and make the Hamas pay, actually make the Hamas stop or to exist as a political power, as a regime.
That's Major General Uzi Dayan. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Israel's former UN ambassador, Dor Gold, spoke to the U.S. House of Representatives Committee's Oversight and Governance Reform Subcommittee to discuss the recognition of Israeli sovereignty over the Golan Heights. DEPCA sources reveal that this was the first step of Netanyahu and Trump to recognize Israel's annexation for the Golan, which Israel captured from Syria in a six-day war. Dor Gold stated that the U.S. recognition of Israeli sovereignty would fulfill previous administration's promises. He also argued that Netanyahu would work with Syrian President Bashar Assad to discuss surrendering parts of the Golan to Syria. He said the Golan, while only 16 miles across, is of utmost importance to Israel, as the IDF post on the top of Mount Hermon provides a strategic military advantage to view key areas in Syria. This is especially important now that Russia could save the Assad regime and the Syrian military could be strengthened. Iran has positioned Shiite militias with forces from Lebanon, Iraq, Yemen, and Pakistan on Syrian bases to take control of southern Syria. A Syrian presence on the Golan raises concerns for Israel. The loss of intelligence outposts would prevent Israel from being able to detect a Syrian offensive, and Israel would be hesitant to wage war to recover its former line of defense after it was enclosed in Syrian territory. Any security arrangement on Syrian land could deprive Israel of the Golan and security. Iran's axis of resistance, which has been operating under Russian protection, threatens several Middle Eastern countries, including the Arab Gulf states and Morocco. These governments would not question the need for a permanent Israeli presence on the Golan. The Assad regime is recovering from a civil war, and its allies are making demands, which include returning the Golan Heights. U.S. recognition of Israel's sovereignty over the Golan would prevent that threat of Iran and its supporters.